Hello everyone. Today we would be starting with a fresh new session of real-time project development that we offer as part of our online course. So, before actually starting with the actual content of this course, let me quickly tell you that what are our plans for this batch. Okay, so the basic plan here would be we would train candidates in order to suitably work in IT companies, any organization that you go, right from smaller companies to the very high end big MNCs of the market, or even product companies, starting from service companies to extreme product companies where there would be always workload, work pressure over your head, and you would be expected to deliver more in a small span of time. So all these areas we would be walking throughout the entire IT organization, taking examples from different work experiences, like how things go for different projects, what are when criticality comes, how you should actually approach on. So gathering all these knowledge from different projects, different functionalities, we have started this course of real-time project. Okay, and the basic idea here was simple, because generally when a fresher walks into the organization, he spends some time, like 1 year, 2 years, and sometimes it goes down to 3 to 4 years. Then he actually understands what IT actually expects out of him. Okay, for example, a fresher goes in for some projects, he might not really be involved in doing actual core stuff, right, because he's considered to be a fresher. So for 6 months, 1 year time, he would do very basic minimal stuff, and from there on the learning curves really become slow. Now because of all these things, what happens is, if later point of time you want to do some job switch and all, so at that time people expect you to have more knowledge, but since the basic start is slow, getting to that big knowledge takes some time. So what most of the times is observed is, when people are really switching jobs, claiming suppose 2 years experience, 3 years experience, so even though they have proper experience, genuine experience on letterhead, but their knowledge is not up to mark. Okay, and it has been a lot of incidents that when we also conduct some interviews for some company, so we are sometimes part of the interview panel as well, the faculties of this NOC. So when we conduct the interview, there are many people who claim 2 3 years of experience, but they are not able to justify it in that interview span. Okay, so that clearly says that market is having a lot of people who is not having knowledge level up to the mark. Okay, so then we thought, okay, somehow these people needs to be educated for this, like what exactly the IT wants from them, not only in terms of the technology but other implementation perspective, and thinking that the application is going to be is designed to sustain a big load, and it is really going to help out and satisfy the clients when you develop the project. So keeping all these things in mind, we have started this course. Okay, so now let me quickly talk about what we people are and what is the plan of this course duration. Okay, so firstly, it is a course which will be conducted by multiple faculties. We have around 3 people who organize and conduct this course, and these all 3 people are currently working for some companies, and they have 6+ years each into the IT sector only. And Natrasar has hired these people in order to conduct these online classes. So it would all be their genuine experience which they would be sharing with you people, and they have conducted a lot of interviews, and also from that also the gatherings would be taken, and you would be shown the right way of how to work in for critical projects, and starting to end how the development process happens. And they would be sharing each and every bit with respect to technical implementation required for the project, with respect to management skills required in your IT industry. So from different angles you would be getting this course. Okay, so let me launch the notepad. Real-time industrial training. Okay, so the key portions that we would cover as part of this course is a project. Okay, we have a project with us, and you people would be involved in doing the development of it. Okay, it's purely in the IT manner. Let me talk about the target audience of this session. First of all, anyone who have not got good exposure in their working environment. So if they want to really become smooth and comfortable with the IT kind of work, and believe it, by the end of this course you would be getting a knowledge equivalent to what a 5 years of experience in IT has it. Okay, and believe it, it's not really a surprising thing to be thought of. It's practically possible. Why? Because it's just like there is a concept, you need to know that, and the point is, till now nobody has told us that. Okay, so now based on your experience you would be exposed to different areas over a period of 5 years. Okay, and when you get exposed you automatically learn. So getting all that knowledge just right in 1.5 years would definitely add a lot of value to your career. Okay, why? Because when we talk about big projects and when your experience goes, then technology implementation would just be one of the area that you need to focus on. There are many other things which, for developing a successful project, you need to care about, and those all things we would be talking here. And most precisely it is going to be somewhat related to load. Okay, nothing but the application that you have designed or developed, to what extent it sustains big load of, nothing but when huge traffic hits the application, is it giving the same performance which ideally is when load is small. Okay, we have to think from the perspective of memory, we have to think from the perspective of CPU consumption, the thread resources utilization, nothing but we have to think from underneath when we do coding, when our experience grows. Okay, and why? Because you develop an application, client is suppose satisfied with whatever work you do, but when suppose big load hits your application, thousands of requests per second, if your application is not able to sustain that big traffic. Okay, because we always have that physical restriction, the in terms of the hard disk capacity, in terms of the RAM capacity, in terms of the your JVM size, we always have that physical restriction. Now with this restriction, when big load hits your application, the question is whether you have taken care of addressing this big load. Okay, you might apply a lot of thoughts, like clustering would be there, load balancing would actually act on a cluster, and we have to think of all this. Then with respect to your CPU consumption, if some functionality is really taking a lot of time to complete its execution, we have to think how we can optimize that. If some piece of code is taking too much of your IO resources in terms of disk writing or occupying a lot of memory in your heap, we need to start thinking of all these perspectives. Okay, and in future in your career, when you would be getting a platform to learn this, nothing but when you get around 5-6 years of experience, you would definitely be involving in all these areas. Okay, and that takes some maturity to grasp things and do it. Okay, so as part of this course you would be given that maturity, so that you would understand how do you focus on all this. And believe it, this course is going to be around 35 sessions approximately. So in each of this session you would be getting a content of that level. Okay, so that would really help out very early area stages. And again, anyone who wants to really become comfortable with IT, suppose you have not worked in any Java project till now, you are into some other platform, but you want to come in Java, yes, we would be answering these kind of things also here. And next, if people are in maintenance or support kind of work, they don't know how the development process happens, nothing but how the code review happens. There is a process from starting till the end. We give the project in production. So across all these areas, what happens, would be focusing on each and every one of it. Okay, so the first thing is, like I already said, it's a course of 35 sessions. So what we have done is, we have taken a project as an example. Okay, so the core of this course is a real-time project, but it is not just a simple project where we just focus on. But what we have done is, we have gathered functionality across different projects that we have worked on or we have seen in our IT experience, and the important functionalities of all these projects we have collected it out and given as part of a single project. So nothing but the project would be one, functionalities would be with respect to this one project, but the implementation, okay, with respect to Spring, with respect to the database, with respect to the behind background processes, and all these would be actually from different projects. So it's like a multiple projects into one, so that within this 35 days of time, 35 sessions of time, you would be getting the maximum benefit. And believe it, once you get to know all these use cases, once you start implementing all these use cases, okay, so automatically across different projects you can apply all these. Okay, I'll give you one practical example. It was a case that I was learning and implementing EJB, okay, Enterprise Java Beans, for some of the online course itself. Now while learning that, I got some time to understand the implementation internal to EJB, nothing but how they manage their internal memory wise thing, how things happen internally within the EJB architecture. Okay, now I got those concepts, and believe it, in my next project I implemented those EJB concepts. Nothing but there was a situation given, like my project was demanding a situation, okay, and in that case I applied what people have done internally in the EJB environment. And believe it, these are great people, big architects, they have thought a lot before implementing it in terms of CPU, memory and IO consumptions. So I applied that, I presented that idea in front of my team manager, saying that this task I would be doing in this manner, and the solution was what was implemented by EJB architects in underlying layer. So when I presented that, that really helped in getting good confidence in front of my managers and all, and that really was further implemented and people were really satisfied with that. Okay, so here as part of this course also, the technical exposure that would be given to you people in terms of how do you code and target a particular functionality, that would not really be specific to one project, but coming down in your career, if any time you get a requirement like that, you can simply implement it there, and that would really be the best solution over a period of time, which what we have seen out. Okay, so the project would be there, which has functionalities of multiple critical projects in one. Okay, now with respect to the project, what all you people would be working on. So like currently IT demands, like a person needs to be happy working with all the areas in terms of the UI, in terms of the middle layer, in terms of the database, if there is any integration using web services and all that. Nothing but wherever possible, a Java person is expected to know this entire thing. Okay, starting from the UI stuff to the middle layer related coding, to the database, to the integration aspect. Okay, we need to be knowing all these. Why? Because recently there was a case. Have you ever worked with Agile environment?
No, sir.
So nowadays, for big companies, for major MNCs, what they are doing is they are starting a project in Agile manner. Okay, nothing but the project development life cycle is Agile, and with that it becomes more dynamic. Okay, believe it, I have worked in a non-Agile environment and also in Agile environment for 2-3 years, and if I compare the two, a person who has worked in Agile environment, he is more dynamic as compared to one who has not worked. Okay, dynamic in terms of his thought process, is in terms of his productivity. Nothing but he knows like what he is capable of delivering within 1 day of time. Within 1 day, if you take like per hourly basis, this person who has worked in Agile is matured enough to calculate his hourly basis output also. Okay, he knows his timelines, like given a task, how he can address it within limited period of time. Okay, and actually the process makes it dynamic. So with Agile, if I say, then there were instructions given from my manager of Agile saying you are expected to know everything when it comes to your Java project development. Why? Because it might happen if it is Agile. One very important thing with Agile would be timelines. Within a timeline you have to deliver. Okay, Agile strictly focuses on that. Within suppose 1 week of time or 2 week of time, this functionality has to be completed. Okay, now when it comes to this time restrictions, definitely it would be a question given to the team whether you can do it within this much of time. They analyze and all that, but they have to give a proper estimate. If they say that it's possible, then after 2 weeks of time you have to deliver it. But if the team says no, it's not possible to develop within 2 weeks of time, then you are answerable. Then you should be in a position to justify to your manager why it is not possible to complete within two weeks of time. Okay, and that kind of that gives a proper confidence of justifying and thinking what a team is capable of delivering. Okay, you cannot give some rough idea like, okay, it's not possible because of so and so reason. Then your manager might end up convincing you, no, you have to do it within 2 weeks because I see that it's practically possible. Okay, so one important thing comes is timelines, and with these timelines you need to be well aware that there might be a lot of problems coming when you practically try to stick to timelines. Nothing but suppose there is a UI person in your team who has gone sick, or due to some reason he is unable to come to office. Automatically, because of one person, your end-to-end functionality would be affected. Now in this kind of environment, as a manager, I would like that one Java resource also knows the UI stuff, so that at least he does the basic minimum, even though the UI person is not here, but you do his part also, and automatically the project lines would be met. Okay, so automatically now what is happening is a person is expected to know things of other areas also. That makes it more dynamic and more ready for a kind of situation. And there are a lot of examples, right? It has been a case like in my previous project, all of a sudden my manager said, okay, currently we are not finding suitable UI resource, and there is a budget level restrictions also to hire the candidate within this small span of time. So my manager requested me that, okay, you are good at Java stuff, but also if you can take up the ownership of this UI, okay, some UI level knowledge and all. So definitely then I was like, manager is requesting, we have to do it, we have to give the project in on time. So I was involved in UI plus database also. So we need to open up our thinking rather than just thinking of one area to multiple other aspects. So as part of this course, we would be focusing on practical implementation of UI, practical implementation of middle layer, database, and also of the integration. Okay, so with respect to UI, the basic minimum knowledge would be there, so that once you go on to the project, if you are given some UI task, or if it is about understanding the UI stuff, you should not go blank there. Okay, and when in interview you say, yes, I can work, do some fair bit of coding in UI, then that would give some confidence to the interviewer also, because you are like having now multiple options. Okay, so now with respect to UI, we would focus on basic HTML, CSS would be there, JavaScript would be there, Ajax would be there, and believe it, nowadays every UI level thing requires all this. jQuery would be there. Okay, this is the basic minimum that we have as part of a UI slot, and not just theoretical but some practical would be given, and you would be asked to do some codings, design some pages, apply appropriate validations and stuff like that as part of the UI technologies. Okay, now next, in terms of the middle layer, our focus is currently majorly on the Spring environment. Okay, and that is a Spring MVC application. We would be designing a web application, and with respect to Spring, we would see to what extent we can use your Spring MVC application for achieving big project development. And as you know, Spring is a big tool set which contains a lot of features, like Spring core module would be there. Then in Spring you can do JDBC related activity, DO related activity, then integration, and there are a lot of other concepts. So we would know the right practices of using Spring for your application in terms of organizing. Have you worked on any Spring project before?
No, sir, I'm working on struts, but I have knowledge on Spring.
Okay, so you have knowledge on Spring.
Yeah.
So that would definitely help you out. Why? Because if basic knowledge is there, on top of that, the right ways of implementing Spring with respect to actual projects. Okay, in terms of code organization, in terms of writing the controllers, the service components, and all these areas, and how to define the XMLs, and with respect to multiple modules of your project, how the organizations would be there, who takes the ownership of which module, and how he codes in that. So with respect to packaging, organization, a lot of stuff would be discussed on. Next would be your Spring JDBC module related stuff. All these would be practically done. DO module related stuff. Next we would be talking about Spring security also. Okay, why? Because any application needs to be a secured application. So with respect, while working with Spring, how do we achieve this security? Okay, and now the point is, in a company for a project, you might not do all the things, right? You might be a person who is just playing a role in one particular section. So it's not required that you have worked entirely on the UI also, on the middle also, on the web services also, and all everywhere. It's not practically possible. But what happens is, over a period of time, from different projects, you gather different knowledge. Okay, and now as part of this course, what we are doing is, we have 3 faculties who are working in different companies and have worked on different project areas. So it is possible that if I have not seen something in my entire 6 years of experience, other person might have well exposed himself on top of it. Okay, so now with this you get a definite variety, like it's practical experience of different people or different situations. So as a student or a candidate, your thought would definitely be thinking of a different angle. Okay, so now some concepts like security and all that, maybe I have not worked on it, but one of my team member has worked on it, and he knows how critical it is with respect to projects and all. So definitely now you would be getting his angle with respect to this. So these are how the course content would be well matured enough, and how things happen in your IT. Okay, so as part of your middle layer, we would be focusing purely on Spring with respect to all these concepts. Next, with respect to database, we would work with some SQL databases. Okay, like Oracle you can take, or MySQL. So we would work with some databases like that. So now, how database involve while doing the project development? Okay, nothing but the thought process. The actual heart of the application would always be the data. Okay, your application runs on memory, in some JVM, all those things keep on happening, but what is the background thing that is stored is the data. Okay, and for any organization, for any project, the data is the most important one. Okay, now suppose you take the example of a banking project. Now for banking project, the basic thing is the customers would have some account balances. Now all this is nothing but some data which is residing in some database. Now whatever your application does, but in the end, we need to have a mature database which contains information like what is the account balance of this person, has he invested in some policies or any FDs for this person, when you're transferring money from X to Y account, some status tracking. All this information needs to be stored in your database. Okay, and now, since it is going to be a practical use case of using database for your projects, you need to have a mature thought of how you think with respect to database when it comes to coding for your application. Nothing but designing the proper database schema in terms of appropriate tables with proper columns. Okay, with proper constants of primary key, foreign key, if any triggers to be there, how do you do that? Then how is Java coding going to follow with respect to database? Nothing but first designing the database table in such a way that you don't miss out any of your functionality. On top of that, how do you start coding your Java in an SOA kind of architecture, service oriented architecture? How within the database multiple schemas would be maintained, how your modules or services of your application would be interacting with these schemas. So all these things, thinking about all this is definitely required when you start involving more in the process of project development. Okay, so that means it's not just going to be coding a particular thing, rather it would be designing a proper application which is capable of executing well in an environment. Okay, which should be very much organized, which should be highly performance wise good, and in terms of CPU consumption, memory consumption, thread consumptions, it should all be optimized application and should be in a position to sustain big load as well. So your focus, as your experience grows, your focus changes from just coding to coding in right ways. Okay, in coding the application in the best possible way that you can, and then the market needs people like those also. Why? Because once people get matured enough to think of all this, then just imagine a project goes live in production area and automatically everything is purely superb in production. Why? Because in development times itself you thought about practicality, what problems might come in production, and you have coded accordingly. So all these things would be definitely got as part of this area. Okay, so now database, you would be knowing, designing some appropriate schemas, then DB models, the DB tables and all that. Next, your basic querying and all that would be there. With respect to Spring, we would take with respect to JDBC module, DAO module. So all these things would be done with respect to your database, and how you actually proceed, database, Java work, UI work, those end-to-end things we would see. And next, when it comes to integration, we currently the market, lot of things are there with respect to web services. Do you have some basic knowledge of web services?
No, sir, I don't have.
Okay, not required. For this process, we would be giving you some initial idea about web service, so that it is bare minimum knowledge which if you have for web service, you can work on any web service application also. Okay, so that kind of basic, some sessions would be given precisely on web services, and this web service we would integrate it again with respect to our project. Okay, and this web services knowledge would be with respect to what latest we have in the current market with respect to implementation, and also some extreme web services concepts like web service security and all these areas also we would be focusing on. Okay, so now that is all what we have thought about as part of the practical implementation for this project. Okay, and it's not really just theory. We would give some practical demonstrations, we would give some assignments, and accordingly you people would be asked to apply your thought process inside it, and automatically that would help you to quickly adjust to what exactly IT wants in terms of practical coding also. Okay, we would be doing your code review, we would be guiding on the right areas what you need to focus on. But apart from all this, okay, these are basic things which would be there for every project that you go. But apart from all this, there is one area, nothing but some free softwares or open source softwares. Okay, so now free softwares or open source softwares, with respect to IT, there is one thing that it always keeps on changing. It is dynamic. Okay, from time and again, if some people find some problem with the system, what they do is they try to provide the solution. Okay, if suppose there is some business requirement and there is no tool available in the market, what big companies end up doing is they end up designing some tool which would help to do things in a much organized manner. Okay, so by this way things would keep on happening, and IT is always going to be like that. People would be facing problems, they would be coming up with some solutions. It may be in some form of a tool, or maybe in some form of a free open source softwares, or it can be anything. Okay, so like this, lot of new things would always keep on happening. So now as a person in Java project development, you should mature yourself in order to use these tools. Okay, why? Because no matter how much you learn all this, it's a guarantee that in your next project you might see something new. Okay, with respect to maybe technology or with respect to some new tools. Why? Because things would always be adding to this IT world. People would be designing new things. Why? Because they face new problems, and current infrastructure that we have in IT, maybe tools, softwares and all that, they are not in a position to address those problems. And if they are not in a position, then the IT market needs something which would be in a position to give the answer. Okay, so that is where you would see these tools would always be there in IT, these new technologies would always be there, these new frameworks would always keep on coming in the market. Okay, and when this comes, how a Java developer should actually address learning it first and then implementing it. Okay, it's not required that always you habituate to some kind of training program and spend a lot of time out there in order to get it done. But for these small tools, for these small technologies that keep on coming in the market, you need to make yourself that independent, that spending some time on net, you should be in a position to start working on those tools. Okay, why? Because these are not some courses that really take a lot of time for completion, but it is something that you spend 1 day, 2 days of time, and you should be in a position to practically code it with respect to your application. And generally when you go for your project development, if there is any new tool like this, okay, your project manager is simply going to ask you question, have you ever worked on this thing before? Maybe it is some technology or it is some software. If you have worked on, well, happy, you would be again asked to continue your work here. But if you have not worked on it, your manager or your lead is just going to tell, okay, take a couple of days, spend some time on net, see how you can practically do it, what are the good points of this software or bad points, do some R&D about this software, means is it practical to use it for our project, then what are the problems that might face when you are trying to implement this. So some kind of analyzation would be required, right? It means you have to spend some time on net doing some research work about these tools, and while doing all that, within a couple of days you have to make big decisions, like whether you would be using this software for the project. First of all, okay, means based on your requirement, is this software matching or is this technology matching? If it matches, how do you implement it? If it not match, why it is not matching, what are the drawbacks? And then you have to analyze, is there some other alternate in the market which can address your business requirements? Now once this portion is done, next area would be, how do you quickly implement it for your project requirement? Now for doing that, you have to experiment, some basic simple application you have to develop, see whether it's working, what are the problems faced in that, then apply it in your project areas. So now that means for any new thing in the market, for applying it for your project, you need a direction. Okay, and for getting this direction, it's required that you maturely understand what you have to do. Okay, and when your experience grows, people would be asking you to make these mature decisions. And believe it, a lot of times when we conduct interview, we give a kind of environment of some new thing in the market. Okay, what we have worked in our projects, something like that. We give a scenario like this is something new. Okay, we were facing these problems, we had no solution, we started implementing this. Now a simple interview question we used to place to our candidates, okay, this is some new thing, how would you approach towards it with respect to your project development? Assume that you don't know what it is about, and most of the times these new technologies or tools might not be used for all projects, but just assume that it is something new which can be anything. How do you approach in order to understand it, implement it, make it well working with your project? Okay, why? Because if this thought process is clear, that means the candidate sitting in the interviewer hall can do anything with respect to any new thing in the market. So the question is not basically about, given suppose I name it, okay, some new thing, some software I would just like to tell, suppose Redis. Okay, it is some new thing which I was using in one of my project. We have one more thing called as Zookeeper. Okay, in my project, again some past project, there was a new thing called as 0MQ. Then there is something called as MongoDB, a NoSQL database. Now These are just some examples. Now, out of these four things, how many of you means out of these four have you worked on anything till now?
No, sir.
No. It's expected. Why? Because it's all about getting a project which has all these features. If not there, that doesn't mean that it's you have no, you need to know a lot of things of IT. It's not that the case. But the point is, IT would be having these things which would keep on coming, and unknowingly for some project you might be exposed to these. And if you are exposed to this, you need to have the right direction. What do you do in order to implement it for the project? Okay. And just assume in my interview time, means when I am conducting interview of some person, I would just give a scenario. Okay, I have a software called as Zookeeper, and I use it for this area, for this particular usage, whatever Zookeeper is used for. I tell them the exact definition when I should use a Zookeeper. Okay, now I would simply ask a question. Now you know the context. If this is the problem, Zookeeper is one of the solution, and I even tell what Zookeeper would be capable of doing. Now I just simply tell him, suppose you are made the POC of Zookeeper within the team. Okay, nothing but point of contact. Now when there is a team available of 10 members, everyone is not going to start learning Zookeeper. Manager would give that task to one of the person, saying you are the Spock for this one, single point of contact for Zookeeper. You analyze it, tell us what is right or wrong, and tomorrow come up with the entire analysis. Okay, should we use Zookeeper, then what are the problems inside it, and also try to do some practical application. Okay, this would be given. Suppose now my interview question is this particular Zookeeper stuff, if you are made the POC of it, how would you approach in understanding Zookeeper and implementing it for the project? Okay, a simple question. I am not really targeting him to tell me everything about Zookeepers and all that, but I want to understand his thought process. Given something new, is he really having that kind of direction how you should proceed on, or is he just talking some kind of stuff which is maybe practically possible or not possible? It all depends upon whether he is in a position to logically think of any new thing. So that's my basic aim. So now we would be giving you some practical assignments on all this. Okay, we would give you on how do you think while doing the project implementation. We would be giving some examples of implementing this with respect to your existing things in the market. Like Spring is having integration with Redis. Okay, there are a lot of applications which interact with 0MQ. With respect to MongoDB, a NoSQL database, or Couchbase, your Java application can work with. So how Java interacts with all these, okay, that all integration parts we would be focusing on. And as part of this course, you would be getting a maturity for these things also. Okay, so this again is practical stuff. Okay, now once this thing is done, next very important area of focus is the tools. The tools used in your IT industry. And believe it, whether you are a fresher or whether you are a high-end manager, everyone uses tools in IT. Okay, and for doing project development, a lot of times you would be asked to work on different tools. Okay, and for working on tool, your manager is not going to give you like X days of time that you learn tool. Suppose if it is something new, he won't give you that much time to learn tool first and then implement it. Means on the fly there are tools, almost like 6-7 tools you would find for every project. Okay, and you have to work with that only if you are doing project development. Now since you say that you have worked you have 1.5 years of experience, you would be exposed to most of the tools which are used on a daily basis, right? I would just list down a few. You just keep on telling me whether you have worked on it or not. Okay, some IDE. Yes, you have worked on some IDE.
Yes.
So Eclipse IDE, suppose.
Yes.
Second, Maven.
Yes.
IDE for project integration, we use Maven. Next,
Yes.
SVN or Git or anything like that. Worked with it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Next, for logging, a tool like Log4j. Worked?
Yes.
Next, JUnit. Along with JUnit, most of the times mocking is going to be useful. JUnit and JMockit for unit testing and mocking. Worked with this?
Yes, sir. Jain.
Okay. Actually, for one of my project, I was using JUnit, and we got to a like right? JUnit, we run it from our independent machines. It doesn't happen in an integration environment. You have to set up the entire thing locally and run it from Eclipse, something like that. So now, while I was running some JUnit cases, okay, there was a situation in which it was not possible to run my actual functionality in a standalone manner. Means we needed to interact with the external web services or EJV components or with external components, and running that locally, if suppose the service is down, external, suppose database is down, and I want to call a procedure for running my test case, it's practically not possible to do that if the DB node itself is down. So in these kind of situations, mocking comes to the rescue. Okay, so how practically you can use mocking, and believe it is also some interesting concept, and that would really help you also in learning stuff. Next, some tool for code review. What do you use for code review in your organization? Any software you use in Precise?
No, sir. I don't have idea.
Okay. So there is a software called as Code Collaborator, which can be used for code review purpose. It simplifies life. Okay, now once this is done, Jira for bug reporting and bug tracking purpose, again common for many projects. Next, working with Linux environment. You have worked with Linux environment?
Yeah, for only 6 months, sir. After this shift.
Okay, no problem. So one very important thing would be, for most of the projects out here in India, okay, the final production deployment happens in Linux environment. Okay, for most of the projects. There are some cases in which people also deploy things in Solaris operating system, and some cases people do Windows based deployment also, but for some big projects always Linux is preferred. Okay, so in my 6 years always I have worked with this scenario. The application to code or the development happens in a Windows machine, but the deployment is happening in a Linux machine. Okay, and now just think, this is the situation. The final code of the entire project would be deployed in some Linux machine in production server. Okay, you're coding in Windows environment. Now since the final deployment area is a Linux box in production, that means your testing should also happen in a Linux machine, so as to avoid all surprises. You don't know if suppose some operating system level differences come, means you have tested in Windows but it's behaving in a different way in Linux. You don't want to get into that kind of mess. So what happens is, when you are doing your coding, when you are doing your project development, your integration testing, okay, where the entire project code would be combined together and tested rigorously, that is going to happen in a Linux machine itself. Okay, now you have to, and believe it, as a Java developer, a lot of times you need to involve in working with Linux. Generally it is your daily activity. Every day you would be involved. If you get a project like that, you have to deploy in Linux. You have to do a lot of testing in the Linux environment. So now when Windows to Linux comes, you need to be aware of some tools which would be simplifying the life there. Okay, like Putty is one, WinSCP is another, Mobaxtem is next. Nothing but these are some softwares which helps us to connect from Windows to Linux environment. Apart from this, for working with Linux, first we need to be aware of all these tools. Once we are aware of these tools, then you would be connecting to Linux environment, and there you need to know some basic commands which Linux really has, in terms of copying a file, moving a file, restarting some services, and tailing something. Nothing but when you're doing your testing, log files would be generated. You need to be in a position to properly analyze the log files, because a lot of times when development happens, there might be some problems or bugs in your project. So now tester perspective, they just say there is a bug, but as a developer you have to analyze and tell what exactly is the bug, why exactly is the problem. So you need to analyze big logs and all that. So while analyzing logs, you need to know how effectively you can traverse through the Linux machine to the log files and use various commands to, and there are a lot of things required. So all these would be command based with respect to your Linux. So now all these things also we would be talking about. Best working minimum that any Java developer should know. Okay, it is a must know. Why? Because if you don't know that, what happens if you suppose lead says deploy this in suppose Linux machine and do the testing. While doing the testing, if you get problem, your lead is not going to involve in identifying the problem. He would just give you a direction. Okay, maybe this is the problem. You go to the logs, analyze it and tell me and fix the problem as well. Now you need to know the right commands in order to search some problem, get to it quickly. How do you grep through the files? How do you tail the files with respect to your application execution? How the log and everything with respect to Linux is going to work out. You have to analyze all those things and then tell what exactly is the problem. Okay, so all these things we would be focusing on with respect to the Linux environment. Okay, now all these done, next that we would focus on is some design patterns used for this project. Okay, it's not again required that there are a long list of design patterns, but some design patterns are really required on a very common basis. Okay, and now not just theory, but you need to understand the actual core of it, why this design pattern is required. Okay, if you study somewhere you would get it, but believe it, when I started my career as a fresher working, people said design patterns are important, you learn design patterns, that would give you really a nice angle to do coding and all those things. I studied design patterns, I was even implementing it for one project, two project, understanding it, but I never understood the core need of that design pattern. Okay, but what happened is after getting 4 years experience, I was exposed to some situation where it was really getting complicated when I was doing the coding. Okay, then I thought, okay, now how do I fix it? Because while coding it really went that bad in terms of organizing the code and optimizing the code. Then I said, okay, there should definitely be some design pattern using which I can do it in a much simpler way. Okay, now then I got a problem first. I understood the problem very clearly. I was knowing that it is a problem. Then I just spent time on Google, like this is the problem, is there some solution for it? Then there was some ready-made design pattern available. I studied that, and believe it, when I was trying to practically imagine like how this design pattern can solve this problem, it was really answering me all my doubts. Nothing but, even though I was knowing design patterns right from first year of experience onwards, but I got the actual understanding of it only after I got 4 years of experience. So that means we need to have that kind of knowledge also. So some few design patterns we would share so that you also get some thought process of what is the actual impact of design patterns in your project, why you should use it, where you should use it, some strong points. Okay, once this is done, then challenges faced during project development. Okay, there would be a lot of challenges. Life is not that simple in IT, you might be knowing it. For different projects, once your responsibilities grow, while you're doing testing, while you're doing load testing, while things are coming close to production, more and more challenges would be keeping on. If the project is really complicated, critical, big project, then you would be getting a lot of challenges. Okay, and now some common challenges which we have faced across different projects, those we have summarized it down and telling you. Okay, so what happens is this would not only open up your thinking, like what kind of problems might come for big project development, but it would also give you solutions, what you should do if you get this problem. Okay, and this thinking, if you get it right, it would definitely change the way you think when you walk into interview. It would change the way you think when you do your coding. Why? Because you know that if this thing is not taken care of properly in production area or in further down in the project development cycle, sometime it is going to create problems. Okay, that thought you would be getting right in the initial times when you do the coding, and that would make you a change programmer. Okay, and that is what would be the focus of this thing also. So apart from this, okay, and believe it, all these are going to be practical. So something we demonstrate here, execute here, show it in front of you, and on the other side you would be also doing some stuff. Okay, so now once all this is over, nowadays in the market there is something called as Hadoop. You might be seeing there are a lot of projects starting in Hadoop.
Yes, sir.
So now with respect to Hadoop, at least now just imagine that Hadoop is something new. Again, just like the way I told some open source software, now Hadoop came like something new, then people understood why it is used for, then people understood what can be the scope of Hadoop, what all we can achieve using Hadoop, and then finally implemented for projects. It gave results also, and when it started giving results, big companies started implementing it. Following them, many small companies also then started using Hadoop blindly, and that is where it got the fame in the market. Now when there is a demand for something like this Hadoop, so now for our course also we have planned some exclusive sessions on Hadoop. Okay, so like it would be some sessions which would make you understand why Hadoop is used in companies, how you can do programming with Hadoop. Next, talking about importance of that, and you would be given knowledge of how to set up your Hadoop environment separately. Okay, once the setup is done, you would be also involved to the extent of doing one practical application with respect to Hadoop. Okay, and all these things would give you some confidence that okay, it's not really that problematic to learn anything new. Okay, and once you understand and learn Hadoop, that would also open, once you suppose in your resume you can keep it, not that you have worked on Hadoop, but you can simply put it saying you can work on Hadoop, you have basic knowledge, you know how to do the setup, you know how to do the basic programming with Hadoop. And believe it, for working for any project or any new technology, if you know how to set it up, if you know how to work with that, that's more than sufficient, right? You don't need anything more. If you are able to do some basic applications, you can plug it somewhere in your project. And if you know how to set up Hadoop, that would definitely give you a value. Why? Because if suppose in your team Hadoop is being used, one of the team member is going to set up Hadoop. Okay, whatever required, the jars and all that, R&D would be done, drag drop, make the environment ready. Only one person. Others would just use that environment. That means you might not really get a chance to do the setup and write from scratch and complete it. Okay, but here as part of our classes, you would be made that special person who knows how to configure Hadoop from scratch, do the application development, so that now when you talk in interview, you can say that yes, I know how to work with Hadoop also, and if there is any project requirement using Hadoop, you would be a person to be there for that. Okay, so all these things would be the area of focus. Apart from this, okay, our main focus would be like your life in IT should be simple. Okay, and life in IT should be simple. What we have analyzed and planned the course content is entirely from our angle, what we think like people should know, what we think like when we come to the challenges and all that, we would be talking about the internal threading environment, and we would talk a lot of stuff about load, we would talk about the memory utilizations, we would talk about the thread utilizations. What happens if for your project these utilizations are more, suppose your CPU is running like 80%, 90%, that high, so with this CPU you cannot run in production definitely. Why? Because if it is running with 80-90% with some more load added, your CPU would just go on like 100%, and then you won't be doing anything. So now, if you first thing would be how do you identify these kind of big problems. Second thing would be what are the solutions and how do you work on the solutions. What are the tools available for working on these solutions. Okay, and if you know all this, then you would be a different person, right, with 1.5 year experience only. Why? Because generally only 6-7 years of experience people generally analyze all these and fix these problems. Why? Because with 2 years experience people are not that mature enough to do that. But if you know it right now, by the time you get 5-6 years of experience, you would become an expert in doing all this, and that would really add a lot of value. So whatever course content we have planned is from our angle, which we feel that okay, people should know it if they are working in IT, and all these things would definitely make you a star of your team. Okay, and we know that every year hikes would be coming, appraisals would be there, promotions would be there. Now when all this is happening, from the entire team, one person, generally 1 or 2% maximum, would be promoted, because there is a organization level restriction also. Hikes, they cannot give like first category, A category of hike to everyone. There is always going to be some range with respect to your variable pay that would be given. There is always going to be something like out of 10 members, 2 people should get the best, rest should get the average, some should get the poor. There is always going to be organization level division like that. Now in order to be in that category of getting promoted first or getting the on-site opportunity first, all these are nothing but you have to create a mark in your team. Okay, and creating a mark, that does not simply mean being good in technicals. There are a lot of examples in my previous organization, some big company, big MNC, I won't reveal the name, but once my TL simply told me, okay, I know that you are a good person technically, you can do the coding, there are no complaints from the client regarding your aspect, but he said I cannot promote you at this point of time. I simply asked a question, why? I am technically so good, I am able to do work on time, deliver things on time. He simply said, remember one thing, being in IT, technical is just one portion, but when it comes of promotions, when it comes of getting good hikes, at that time all the drama would happen in IT. Okay, politics, games, some people establishing contacts, good contacts with the manager, trying to get good hikes and all that. So a lot of other things happen which add a value for getting good promotions. I said, what are those values? Tell me. Okay, then he just quickly I'll tell you. He said, technically you have to be good, no doubt in that, but that is just 1/3 of it. Then I said, what are the other areas? He said, you have to involve in some kind of team building activities. That means you have to take some leadership and build your team in a proper way. I said, how that would be? First he said, now team building would be from 2 angles. First angle would be you can give some training to your team, learn something new, encourage your team to do that. Means if you do this kind of quality, that would be counting for your promotions. Okay. Second, he said, it's better that going for some outing, organizing lunch, dinners, going to some resorts. Definitely budget would be given by the project itself, but if you are doing that kind of extra role, he says that would be also adding up for your promotion. Why? Because technically entire team is working, but you are doing something extra and people get recognized for this something extra only. Okay, and that is really, well, if I thought, then I got a knowledge like, okay, from my team there are people who do all those. Initially I was not knowing that it's carrying a value, but later point of time in my career I got that knowledge. Okay, doing that stuff also counts. Why? Because in that you would be in mails. Okay, your big high-end top managers might not know you that personally, but when you drop mails like our team is going for this outing, in that big managers would also be there in your mail chain. Those managers would finally approve your appraisals and all that. Now when they are doing it, if they know your name, they say, okay, I know this person, he has done a lot of mailing and done a lot of stuff for the team. Automatically they get caught in eyes of big manager, and their chances of success is more as compared to those people who are just technically good. Why? Because we don't drop mails to big managers and all that. Okay, but this also counts. So like this, there are many other things which you need to focus on apart from just technical, for being in good eyes of your manager. Okay, for getting good promotions, for getting good salary hikes, good variable pays and all these things, basically everything nice. Now based on our experience, what we have seen people look for as a candidate for growing quickly, for getting online on-site opportunities, so all those things also we would be sharing out. So that would help you to increase or grow in your career in a much faster way, rather than taking your time and then living to the extremes, like okay, when 2 years of experience then this designation, when 4 years of experience this designation, 10 years of experience that designation, getting on-site opportunity only when you spend like this much time in the organization. All those are standard rules, which is the slowest which you can grow. But if you know the exposed shortcuts, how you can trick, how you can play, automatically your life, your role would be a bit different. And playing is not something you're bluffing, it's not something like it's dirty game or something. It's just being genuine, being honest to yourself, and doing that extra bit. Once you do that extra bit, second thing is you just have to present to your team manager that you have done something extra. So those kind of tips would also be given, which would definitely help you if you implement it, and that would make you a different person from among rest of your team. And when you become that different person, you would be in eyes of your manager, and when you are that, believe it, your life would be great. Okay, so whatever we feel like as a person, we all three faculties sat down, discussed what should be the course plan, why we think this course is important. We tried thinking from the perspective of what failures we see at the time of interview. We need to match your people here. Based on that, we have developed this course plan. Now comes the second area. Apart from all this, if the candidate, nothing but you for example, if you have any doubts, any kind of problems with respect to, no matter what it be, with respect to IT, whether understanding this, whether understanding that, whether it can be a technical problem, whether it can be whatever, okay, any kind of problem you have, we are going to support you to actually overcome that. Why? Because your problem someday or the other in our lives we might have seen it. If we have not seen it, if it is something new, we would apply what thoughts we generally do for our problems, okay, and try to have a discussion and come up with a solution. So support for that would be there, plus our faculties would be available online for you. In Skype you can chat anytime, or their contact numbers would be shared to you, you can call us. And it's going to be like not just a faculty student relation, we want to build a big community online to help people to grow the team. Okay, so that is where we always be positive thought, with positive thoughts we try to approach candidate. Okay, so that's what is the basic plan of this course. And coming further, I think let's see tomorrow, if we tomorrow also we generally we would be having the session, but if there is anything else planned, like suppose if 2-3 people we would gather and then continue with the batch smoothly, then it might be day after tomorrow. But for now assume that tomorrow again we meet at the same time, 7 a.m. So let me just turn off the recording.